Bond. Should I buy a bond? Not James Bond. Bonds are instruments that some corporations and municipalities, like cities, if a city wants to pay for a bridge, they will issue a municipal bond, which you can purchase. What the municipal bond does is allows you to get interest. There's no equity in a municipal bond. You're not buying part of the city in a municipal bond. Municipal bonds are used to raise capital, to raise money. Like I said, if they want to make a bridge and they don't want to tax the taxpayers right away, or sometimes they'll have municipal bonds for a lot of different things that the city wants to do right away. And most of the time, a lot of the time, a percentage of the time, you will not have tax on the bond. So if it makes 8%, you'll get your money back plus 8% on the bond. Now, there's also corporate bonds. What a corporate bond does is Coca-Cola or some other entity that's a corporation wants to borrow a large amount of money and they don't want to deal with a bank. There's also something called junk bonds. Junk bonds has a tendency to pay a higher percentage. Sometimes junk bonds, if you lend them $100, they'll give you 20 back. Sometimes it's 20% interest. There's no equity in the corporation when you buy a bond, unless that bond converts later into stock. And some bonds can convert into stock, corporate stock. But in general, a lot of the bonds will be specifically to purchase something for a corporation. So yeah, you can get some money when you buy bonds. There's a whole slew of bonds, and that's another real interesting thing that has to be thoroughly researched before you buy bonds. There's this gentleman I saw online that deals with certain bonds that are like 10%. And they're supposed to be very good bonds. I forgot the name of the gentleman. I'll have to go do some more research. But in general, I don't look for bonds to purchase. And that's not saying that you won't. A lot of people use bonds. When the stock market goes down, a lot of people put their money into bonds. A lot of people purchase government paper, loaning money to the government. 10-year notes for the government, 15-year, 30-year notes to the government. I personally am not hip deep in buying bonds. I prefer stocks. For me, stocks are easier to buy and sell. There's more liquidity in the stock to me. I prefer stocks. A lot of people say, what about bonds? What about bonds? One of my ex-girlfriends says, I want to know about bonds. Okay. I text her a couple good bonds that I found out about online. Personally, I don't want to load up on a lot of bonds. Personally. But if you learn about bonds, that could be another thing in your arsenal. A lot of people want to buy silver and gold in their arsenal. They want to have, some people say, well, 5% of my portfolio is going to be silver and gold. That's a good hedge. Bonds could be looked at as a hedge against stocks sometimes. I prefer stocks. But to cover bonds, as I said, you can have a municipal bond, a city. They have certain tax advantages, as said. Sometimes there's no local, sometimes there's no state, federal, or local tax on what you make on that bond. That's why you need to talk to your financial advisor if you're choosing to get into bonds, which I don't. I may buy some bonds in the future. I'll let you know which bonds and what percentage of they pay. If I had a corporation, I would issue a lot of corporate bonds. It'd be easier to raise money in a corporation issuing bonds. And a lot of people will buy corporate bonds. And why do you want the corporate bonds? Because you want to have a hedge against your stocks. Some people use bonds as a hedge against their stocks. I prefer other stocks to be a hedge against stocks. Some people use real estate to hedge against stocks. Some people who were in those big hedge funds decided instead of bonds, they were going to hedge with shorting. They lost billions shorting. I don't particularly short. Now, if you go to Robinhood, will let you short stocks. I prefer not to short stocks. It's very speculative. If you really believe that you are good and you understand what stocks you believe are going to go down in value and sink like a rock, then that might be a good idea for you to short stocks. If you believe that you can get 3 or 5 or 9% on your money going after corporate bonds, you can do that. If you believe that you can find some municipal bonds that are going to be good bonds for you, that's going to make you a good amount of money, that's okay. In general, for me personally, at this point in my life right now, I look the other way when it's talking about bonds. There's this one guy that I do think knows about bonds, and I'll mention his name on a later video. As soon as I find out what his name was again, I'll mention it. So if you're trying to find bonds, there's this one guy that knows a lot about bonds online. He's a Jewish dude. I forget what his name was. I remember that he was a Jewish dude because I was trying to find some Jewish stocks. And then he mentioned, his name came up on bonds or something. And I looked at him and I looked at his name, and it looked like, to me, I don't know, I'm not trying to be racist, but it looked like a Jewish name. So I Googled his name, and it seemed to indicate to me that it was a Jewish dude. I have nothing against Jewish dudes. If they know what they're talking, I don't care if you're black, I don't care if you're white, Hispanic, or Oriental. If you know what you're doing, you know what you're doing. Jews, you know, and I didn't say juice like apple juice. I said Jews like Judah. Jews, this particular one knew about bonds. I'm not hip on bonds, but if I find his name, I will post his information on probably on a later video if I revisit bonds again, when I find his name. But he was doing corporate bonds, and he did something called baby bonds. Now, baby bonds are different than other bonds. Baby bonds are just smaller. You can trade them like a stock. You know, a baby bond can be a $20 or $30 bond. Most bonds, oh, come on, guys. Most bonds can be 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever it is. Baby bonds are like, they trade like stocks. Vanguard will trade baby bonds like stocks, and I believe probably the other brokers. I said, be quiet, be good, be good. I don't want you in the frame though. But baby bonds are what people use when they want to invest like stock. When they figure that I want to invest in bonds like I invest in stock, they usually pick baby bonds because they're smaller, they're more portable, and it's easy to buy and sell those. There are certain websites that will help you buy bonds, and then when you're ready to sell them, they'll buy them back, because they always need bonds, because that's what they do. They buy and sell bonds. So it's like, if you want to sell some bonds or buy some bonds, there are certain websites out there. I don't have the links yet. I thought, since I did Why Stock, I want to do one on why not bonds. And for me, the reason I don't want to buy a lot of bonds is because there's no equity in a company. It's just an instrument of debt. It's like you're trying to be a banker for somebody else. And right now, I don't want to be a banker for somebody else. I want to own equity. I want to own part of the company I'm investing in. Now, there are certain bonds that are safe. Like I said, Coca-Cola, I don't see them going broke in the next 50 years. Pepsi-Cola, I don't see them going broke. So short term, if you're thinking that you want to buy a corporate bond and it's going to be 12 months or 18 months or 6-month corporate bond, you have to check. First of all, look at the company that you want to buy a corporate bond from. Look and see, as they say, what's the spreadsheet on that company say about that company? Are they negative in earnings per share? Well, if they're negative in earnings per share and they're trying to sell bonds so they can keep afloat, that might not be the best company to buy a bond for. But you can still do it. You can still do it. Oh, be quiet, puppy dog. You can still do it outside of the YouTube universe. I don't want to be bringing dogs into the YouTube universe. So, yeah. Corporate bonds. Now, if it were like Coca-Cola, and they're doing I'm not saying how much they do or don't do. I don't know if they do $1 billion or $2 billion or $10 billion a year. Say they make $10 billion a year selling Coca-Cola and Powerade or Gatorade or whichever aid they sell. I think it's Powerade that Coca-Cola. I don't know for sure. One of those aids they do. Powerade, Gatorade, whatever it is. I'm not sure whether Coke owns Powerade and Pepsi owns Gatorade, or it's the other way around. But say Coca-Cola wants to build another factory to produce more Coca-Cola, and they issue bonds. Then they have to go to certain banks that will no, that's stocks, excuse me. They don't need banks. They will issue a corporate bond, and then you can purchase a corporate bond and get your 8% or 10% or 4% or 6%. And it has the length of time that the bond is good for. It's going to be like, okay, is it going to be 6 months, 18 months? And then some people buy and sell those bonds in the meantime because they don't want to wait for it to mature and pay the money. And so if they're in a rush, they may sell this bond to somebody else. If they're not in a rush, they'll hold it. So if you're going to get into bonds, it would be a good idea, in my opinion, to be a long-termer in the bond. Now, as far as the government's concerned, if you're trying to hold on to your money, the government has certain things that you can make that acts not like a bond, but they'll sell you debt, their debt. And what happens is you loan them money and they'll pay you back with interest. And so where do they get that money from? Taxes. I'm not hip on that. Now, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that sort of thing, where they're dealing with real estate, to me that makes more sense. But that's not stock and that's not bonds, and that's not what I'm covering right now. I know AG&C buys government paper. Okay. I know that ORC, Orchard Financial, buys and sells government paper. They deal with government paper. Where they sell it, I think they do money on the spread. But bonds are a way a lot of people use to hedge against stocks. And if you want to, you can do that. But I would prefer myself to get the higher interest rate in dividends on certain stocks that I feel are more secure. A lot of people want to diversify into a lot of different things, and if bonds are for you, you can diversify into bonds. So you can diversify. So I'm about ready to upload this, and this is going to be why not bonds? And for me, it has no equity in the corporation unless that particular bond converts into common stock or another stock at the end of when it matures. If you have a bond like that, you might as well just, in my opinion, I would rather buy the stock, which I know that's going to be a stock. Some people want to buy the bond that turns into a stock. Okay. They'll take the capital, whatever interest it gives, and then it converts into a stock instead of getting your money back, or however that particular thing works. I haven't researched that enough to tell you how bonds convert into common shares or preferred shares. That's something that you have to look at yourself. So why not bonds? For me, at this point, I don't want to buy bonds because it lacks equity. That's my main reason. It's like buying a McDonald's franchise and not owning the McDonald's franchise. So, no equity position. Peace out. Live long and prosper. God bless America. Have a jolly good day.